welcome to episode number 072 of Something Else with Ari and Not KJ. Feast your ear holes on this week's episode as we take a look at Mid-South Wrestling from January 13th, 1983. My name is Aria, and welcome to the show. Now, there may be some people out there right now scratching their heads and going, wait, time out. Last week was episode number 070. How the hell did you skip to 072? Is this another one of those lost episodes like happened with 016? To which I say no, because if you're listening to this on angrymarks.com, you should know that not only do I post my shows there every single week, I also post them on YouTube. And YouTube this past week got an exclusive episode. Last like Thursday, actually around the same time that 070 dropped, I did a bonus episode looking at the AEW Winter is Coming episode of Dynamite. So you can go to YouTube right now and check that out. By the way, the link to get to our YouTube page, tinyurl.com/something else YouTube. It's so simple. tinyurl.com/something else YouTube. It is very creative, obviously. And by the way, while we're getting the plugs out of the way to start the show, if you wish to support me and this program without paying anything extra, please consider using my Amazon referral link, which is tinyurl.com/something else Amazon. You just use Amazon like normal. You don't pay an extra penny, but I get a small kickback, which helps me pay for upgrades and, yes, the admittedly small amount I have to pay to produce this show every week. So please consider using that. Please give it out to the people in your life using it. Hey, like I said, it doesn't cost you an extra cent, and it helps out this very program. So with that, let's dive into Mid-South Wrestling. This is Mid-South Wrestling from January 15th, 1983. And yes, I'm aware I also said it was January 13th. It's actually January 15th, 1983, from the Irish McNeil Boys Club in Shreveport, Louisiana. Let's go to the intro of the show with our host this week, Boyd Pierce, and our guest co-host, Mr. Wrestling 2.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Mid-South Wrestling Television. I'm your host, Boyd Pierce, and we have a lot of exciting action. You know, an old adage that stands true, money begets money. And last week you saw what happened as Playboy Gary Hart talked to General Skandar Akbar, and the forces was united. As Kamala, the Ugandan giant, he will join forces this week in tag team action with Playboy Gary Hart's rugged Great Kabuki. Also a special challenge match, the high-flying popular Latin star Chavo Guerrero versus rugged Gorgeous Gino Hernandez. Bruno Sammartino Jr. is here. He'll be against the Louisiana heavyweight champion Jim Hacksaw Duggan. We'll have other great matches. And our outstanding guest commentator this week, the Mississippi heavyweight champion, Mr. Wrestling number 2.
Thank you very much.
We're glad to have you with us. We'll look forward to your expert commentary as the matches go along. Right now, we're going to show the fans at home some of our previous outstanding matches. Right now, Kevin Von Erich versus Mike Bond. Let's watch that right now.
All right. So, not a whole lot to that intro. We're going to have Kamala and the Great Kabuki as a tag team this week, which no doubt will be pretty interesting. Plus, I guess our big main event, it'll be Chavo Guerrero, the hot young Latin star, versus Gorgeous Gino Hernandez, who apparently is not a hot young Latin star. Go figure. And Hacksaw Jim Duggan versus Bruno Sammartino Jr. Our special guest host, Mr. Wrestling 2, literally says 4 words to open up the show. Thank you very much. Spoiler alert, he is not going to be a Bill Watts type commentator. This is not going to be a man who's going to say 50,000 words in the next 49 minutes. But, by the way, actually, I should have mentioned too when I was plugging our YouTube, and hey, you know, this wouldn't be a great show if I didn't go all over the place here. Our YouTube page, which again is tinyurl.com/something else YouTube, also not only does each week's show. It also has the archives. It also has both an audio version and a video version. The video version of the show, no, no, no. It is not you staring at my ugly mug for 45 minutes. You're actually going to watch the show, Mid South Wrestling or the Smoky Mountain Rewatch Along Project. I should warn you up front, and I already have one complaint on YouTube as we speak. It is the audio and video do not sync up. You know, it's me yapping away. I play the interviews as we go along. If it matches up, it's pure coincidence. So just warning you ahead of time. But anywho, back to Mid South Wrestling because it would be too much for me to edit this so it looks like one cohesive podcast and not just me jumping around all over the place. So from what I can tell, and I did do some research here, I tried to anyway. This show was all taped on the exact same day. It's just a weird ass show. I have my theories on what happens, but we'll go through that. So we go to our first match. It is Kevin Von Erich versus Mike Bond. And Boyd Pierce does all of the commentary in this match. Throughout it, he does lay out to give to the Iggy, but 2 isn't picking up on it, has nothing to say. And to be honest, I'm not sure what happened to the original audio here, because it is super obvious that this is re-voiced over. There is no crowd noise. You can hear Boyd is plain as day, but everyone else, including the wrestlers in the ring, are either muffled or making no noise, even though you can see the crowd making noise. There just isn't any noise going on. Kevin locked on a body scissors in the ropes and later on won with a big splash. As I mentioned, you could see the crowd is making noise, cheering Kevin Von Erich's big victory, but you can barely hear it. And, like I said, I don't really know what happened there. It's just one of those things that happened, especially back in the territory days. It's not WWF, as the WWF, later on be known to use their canned applause, which is painfully obvious and would have been painfully obvious here if they had tried to do that. But to continue our painfully obvious and awkward show here, let's go back to Boyd, who's going to weirdly introduce our next match.
Our next match that we'll show you, a tremendous professional athlete from north of the border of Canada, Iron Mike Sharp, in the ring against the former Japanese Olympic champion and rising top professional star, Yoshi Yatsu. So watch along with us right now for this outstanding bout.
So again, Boyd Pierce, if you've never watched this show and your only introduction to Mid-South is listening to me talk about it, they have an announcer. It's Reeser Bowden. We play his audio every so often because, he's a little wacky, he's a little over the top. But Boyd Pierce does not typically introduce the matches from the desk. Or if he does, he'll just give you a general idea of what the match is or who's going to be in the next match or whatever. But he doesn't introduce the match like that. It's just, it's a really weird going on here. And that's why I think there were some production issues. And as we go to our next match, Iron Mike Sharp versus Yoshi Yatsu. As we mentioned at the top of the show, your announcers this week are Boyd Pierce and Mr. Wrestling 2. The announcers for this match, the second match already on the show, are Boyd Pierce and Bob Roop. Bob Roop! I love Bob Roop. I've mentioned that maybe the only person in the world who, likes him and thinks he's a pretty good commentator here. But where the fuck did Bob Roop come from? Like, literally, this is where, the whole thing just gets really fucking weird here because there's no even mention as to why, Bob Roop is here, why Mr. Wrestling 2 specifically is not here. It's just, hey, Bob Roop is talking. And it's like, if you're like, I don't want to say if you're not paying attention. Hell, if you're paying attention, this is weird as fuck. Um, so Bob Roop, who, as we mentioned, is not Mr. Wrestling 2, is doing commentary. Bob says that pro wrestling is more popular in Japan than football is in America. I don't want to call bullshit here, but Bob, that is bullshit. Sharp deadweight Yatsu, so Yatsu had to hoist Sharp up with all his might for a backbreaker. As I always point out, and as I've already mentioned here, and I'll say it again, Bob Roop, for the most part, is a tremendous commentator, and he should have had a post-retirement career doing commentary. Like, I'm sorry, like, there's going to be people who say, "Oh, look at this commentator and that commentator" throughout the day. It's like Bob Roop was pretty damn good, and I think really, really deserved a spot doing commentary. Anyway, Yatsu seemed to fall into the ropes when shot in. He came back and had his head knocked off with a clothesline, and unfortunately could not screw his head back on in time. And Iron Mike Sharp picks up the win here. Okay. Now we've mentioned that Mr. Wrestling 2 is on commentary. And we've also mentioned that Mr. Wrestling 2 hasn't done any commentary yet here. So let's go back to the desk where Boyd Pierce and Mr. Wrestling 2 are going to introduce the next match.
Our next match involves our guest commentator of the week, the Mississippi Heavyweight Champion, Mr. Wrestling 2, as he was in the ring against the former NWA World's Junior Heavyweight Champion from Japan, Hiro Matsuda. And I'm sure you recall that match.
Oh, I certainly do. You know, not only the man being the former World's Junior Heavyweight Champion, but he's a tough competitor no matter how you look at it, and the man is, I knew when I went into the ring I was going to have my hands full, but I feel very, very proud of myself by getting the victory over this man.
It was a great victory and a great match. Let's watch it right now.
Okay. So they introduced the next match. Boyd Pierce and Mr. Wrestling 2 introduced the next match, which is Mr. Wrestling 2 versus Hiro Matsuda, where Mr. Wrestling 2 legitimately and literally tells you that he wins the match. Spoiler alert. So Mississippi State Champion Mr. Wrestling 2 versus Hiro Matsuda. Now, I don't know what the hell happened here. I really fucking don't. But again, when I looked up results from this show, it does appear everything was taped on the same day. So I don't know what the hell's going on here. I don't know, like, if they taped stuff last week that was supposed to air, or, whatever the hell happened, or they taped too much or too little, or what the fuck is going on here. But Mr. Wrestling 2, who was just sitting at the commentary table in a suit, is now standing in the ring in his tights. And by the way, among the people Matsuda trained was Bob Roop, who is back in commentary for this one. And Roop puts over Mid-South for having competitive matches such as this on the television. Okay, now we have mentioned many times, and I've mentioned at least twice so far in this episode, that I think Bob Roop is a tremendous color commentator. And I believe that Bob Roop should have a career as a commentator. This next 50 seconds is not an example of this.
The winner, so is Hiro Matsuda. That's why this is a classic. Very few promotions will air this kind of match. They only want to put this kind of match into an arena. They don't want the people to see it for free. And I have to hand it to Mid-South Sports because of the fact that I enjoy watching this kind of match myself on television. And Wrestling 2, again, one of the most famous masked men ever to wear a mask. And he's very, very, very protective of that mask. I mean, almost maniacal about it, a fanatic. You touch it, the man just explodes. He's like a hand grenade going off. And the big Ugan has been finding that out. He's been trying for a couple of weeks to take that mask off, and all he's gotten is a double handful of trouble. Matsuda.
Okay. So it starts off fine. Undoubtedly, it starts off fine. Roop puts over Mid-South and talks about, You know how they're putting on these great matches here on TV, unlike these other promotions who only want to put their, really big matches on in the arenas. And so he's basically saying that other companies are trying to make money, not saying that Mid South isn't or doesn't, just that's what it's implied anyway. He then says how Mr. Wrestling 2 is one of the best masked wrestlers to ever wear a mask, as opposed to all those great masked wrestlers who don't wear a mask. And then he forgets Kamala's name and he talks about the big Ugandan, which might have been an interesting name for Kamala if they never came up with Kamala. And how the big Ugandan has been going after Two's mask. That was not an example of really good Bob Roop commentary. Matsuda Laksa. That is not an example of really good Aria podcasting. Matsuda uses a nerve pinch that Roop compares to acupuncture. Is it too late to go back and edit out the audio of me saying Roop is great at commentary? I mean, it can't be that hard. Not just, I wouldn't just have to go back here, but go back through 72 episodes, or I guess I haven't done Mid South for every episode, but go back somewhere around 50 to 55 of my 72 episodes and edit out any time I've ever said Bob Roop is good at commentary. You think I can do that? I don't think so either. Okay. Anyway, he then called Two very rubbery, but he said that in a complimentary way because, of course, what else would be a compliment other than Mr. Two being rubbery? He then explained why Two's punch to the gut may be more devastating than done by other wrestlers, which, at the very least, he tried here. So hats off to him here. His commentary is bipolar this week. Just saying that. 2-1 with the power knee lift, as predicted by Two in his pre-match promo. We then go to our next match. It is a big tag team match. It is Kamala and the Great Kabuki with Friday, General Skandor Akbar, and Gary Hart versus, this can't be right, Buddy Landell and Tim Horner? No, really? Buddy Landell and Tim Horner. So 8.5 years before Landell gets fired from Smoky Mountain Wrestling for singing Moon River into the microphone during an I Quit match with Horner, and 9 years before he shoved a check covered in ball sweat down Horner's throat, Landell teams with Horner here. And this might explain why he's mad at Tim Horner all those years later. So let's go to the introduction here. Because Gary Hart and Skandor Akbar have something to say.
As you can see, we've got entering the ring now probably the most awesome tag team you've ever seen, and two of the best-known managers in professional wrestling today, Playboy Gary Hart and General Skandor Akbar.
Of course, Gary Hart knows that money begets money, and that Gary Hart is interested in the American dollar. Certainly, he can tell you that for himself.
Just let's get a couple little priorities straight now, Skandor. Priority in this agreement is cash. Now, every time you want something a little more, you're going to be expected to pay a little more. Now, I know that you have been a man that has spent great sums of money to get things done. But when Kabuki does them for you, each and every time, and I want this straight, the payoff will have to get bigger, bigger, and bigger, and I know you can afford it.
You heard, Greasers heard, the people in Mid-South have heard. It's an agreement.
And an agreement we have.
I just love money, Skandor.
That's quite obvious. And to get on with the match, at 385 pounds, General Skandor Akbar's pride and joy, Kamala, the Ugandan warrior. And his partner in this tag team event at 235 pounds from Singapore, the Great Kabuki.
Well, there.
Okay. So Reeser talks about Kamal and Kabuki, which goes into an Akbar and Gary Hart promo. Gary Hart wants cash, and says Akbar will need to pay more every time he wants something done. He reiterates that every time Kabuki does something for Akbar, it will cost more and more and more. Reeser is openly laughing at this. Gary Hart says he loves money, and Reeser is just like, that's quite obvious. How can someone not love Reeser Bowden? Like, legitimately, like I get, he's a little off the wall, he's a little not traditional, but it's like legitimately, I would rather have Reeser Bowden than that woman who does Raw. Like I watched Raw a few weeks ago, the one where Punk announced what show he was going to be on. I watched the first hour and they had a Piper Niven Chelsea Green match where she introduces Piper and Chelsea with a weird ass accent. Tell me you'd rather have that than Reeser Bowden being Reeser Bowden. I'm sorry. I'll take Reeser 10 times out of 10 here, folks. So I'll tell you what, like there is so much about this show that and just like Mid-South wrestling in general and wrestling back in the day in general. It's like you watch this and it's like, you know what? Like what would happen if you put, two weird ass wrestlers like this together? It's like, wouldn't it expose wrestling if you're having two freaks, two monsters like Kabuki and Kamala in the ring together? Because, they're both like Kamala is a savage, but Kabuki is more of a lone wolf. How like how on earth are they gonna work together? And like the match starts and Kamala and Kabuki don't really know what to make of each other. And Kamala seems absolutely confused, not just by Kabuki's existence, but by Kabuki having hair, which, I guess we don't know that Friday and Akbar have hair. I mean, I just kind of assume. Actually, we've seen Akbar's hair because he's taken his headdress off before when he had that match. I think it was with Mike Sharp that time. But, he's like thrown off by this man who has hair on the top of his head. And then the weirdest thing here is Kamala going to the ring apron and waiting for a tag. Now, Kamala does play his character up well. And I remember reading a story once about Sabu and ECW being pissed off about being in tag team matches because his character wouldn't just wait on the apron patiently for a tag, ignoring the fact that in ECW, tag team matches were rarely really tag team matches. But Kamala played it up well here because, like, he wasn't just standing in the corner holding the tag rope, reaching out, waiting for his tag. He was pacing up and down, back and forth. He was having to have Friday and Akbar constantly, on him to tell him what he needs to do and trying to teach him how to act and how to behave in a tag team match. So the match begins and Budro has no issue manhandling Kabuki. But of course, as soon as Horner tags in, Kabuki immediately takes over. Kamal, as we mentioned, paces up and down the apron without holding the tag rope like a good tag team wrestler. Because when you think of tag team continuity, you think of the great Kabuki and Kamala. Budro tagged back in and immediately took back over on Kabuki until he got kicked right in the face. Kabuki isn't even tagging out here, as all three managers have to basically team up here and convince Kabuki to eventually tag out. Kamala got in and pretty much immediately won with two big splashes. Horner, being the poor sportsman that we all know and hate him to be, shows his poor sportsmanship after the match by attacking Kamala, but the Ugandan giant easily disposed of poor Tim Horner. By the way, if you want to hear me rip on Tim Horner more, the Smoky Mountain Rewatch Along project comes out every Thursday right here on both angrymarks.com and tinyurl.com/something else YouTube. Go check it out. It's fun. It's free. And, if you're listening to this, I don't know why you're not listening to that. Louisiana Champion Hacksaw Duggan versus Bruno Sammartino Jr. As we mentioned last week, Bruno Sammartino Jr. is actually David Sammartino, best known as that guy who's in WWF and has that match with Brutus Beefcake at the first WrestleMania, which, let's face facts, was there purely for Bruno to be on the show. So I watched these shows 2 weeks ago, and I wrote down the next timestamp, and all I wrote is an interesting comment by Boyd. So let's play this and see if this actually is an interesting comment by Boyd, and if not, well, I'll blame somebody else for that.
Another tremendous match coming up as a non-title affair, but nevertheless, both men going all out as Louisiana heavyweight champion from New York State, the foot-stomping hacksaw Jim Duggan versus the high-flying star Bruno Sammartino Jr. Should be a...
That's what it was. The high-flying star, Bruno Sammartino Jr. Now, I accept that there is a decent enough possibility that those of you watching this may never have seen David Sammartino wrestle. You may not have a WrestleMania rewatch, periodically where you watch every WrestleMania beginning at WrestleMania 1. However, even if you have never, ever seen David Sammartino wrestle, more than likely you have seen what Bruno Sammartino looks like. And now, while David is not as, muscular and jacked up as Bruno was, David is cut from the same cloth, especially when it comes to the actual wrestling. David Sammartino is not a high flyer, not in any sense of the word. And no, we're not, it would be unfair to say that anybody in 1983 could compare to like Ray Phoenix when it comes to high flying. No, I don't mean he went to even the middle rope here. So I don't know where the fuck Boyd got that one from here, folks. David uses a great high-flying move, a go-behind and a waist lock, before using a hip toss, which makes Duggan roll outside of the ring. Okay, Duggan's outside the ring. David is inside of the ring. So here we go. Time for, a big high-flying move. So what's he going to do? Is he going to run the ropes, take off, and do a giant suicide dive? No. I'll tell you what. Chavo Guerrero. Chavo Guerrero's on this show. We've seen him do a dive to the outside. So, maybe not a suicide dive. Maybe he'll do a tope. Maybe he'll dive over the top rope, like do a slingshot over the top rope. No, he's not going to do that. Okay, that's fine. But obviously, high-flying Bruno Sammartino Jr., he's got the opponent on the outside of the ring, and it's a big guy. Hacksaw Jim Duggan, 6'3", 6'4", 270, 280 pounds. Hacksaw Jim Duggan's a big guy. So there's a good base there to just do something. Even if what he does is gets to the apron and runs down the apron and jumps off into like a splash of some kind, that'll suffice. All right. Rubbing my hands. I don't know if you can hear it over the microphone. Hopefully you can. Rubbing my hands together. I'm ready. Okay, David. Give it to us. And David holds up his fist and dares Duggan to get back in. Oh, well. I'm sure he'll have more chances. So Duggan clobbered him and clobbered him and clobbered him some more. David with a punch and a trip. And here we go. And he runs into Duggan's elbow and Duggan gets a 2 count. Oops, I lied. So David, oh my God. David left his feet. David did a sunset flip, ladies and gentlemen. What an excellent example of high flying. The sunset flip. Duggan then responds by throwing David to the outside. And when he tries getting back in the ring, Duggan spears David, who collapsed to the floor and got counted out. High-flying superstar David Sammartino, a.k.a. Bruno Sammartino Jr., has been counted out. Okay. Oh, well, I guess you can't always win them all. Except as we mentioned last week, this is the end of David Sammartino Jr. here in Mid-South Wrestling. Actually, for a year, he does come back in exactly 1 year's time to wrestle at another TV taping where he has one match, and that's it. And he doesn't have any house shows. He doesn't wrestle in the Superdome. Not sure what the point of this was. Maybe it was just the trade off. I think Vince Sr. still owned the company. I think we're still in that period of time where Vince Sr. still owned the company, even though it was like getting ready to be sold to Junior. But that's where we are right now. So we go to our next match, which I guess by default is our main event of the show, our TV main event. And actually, it is the last match of the show. We have Gorgeous Gino Hernandez versus Chavo Guerrero. Good news, Paul Bosch is not here this week. Somehow, this is considered a special challenge match. Now, you might ask yourself, why is this a special challenge match? How is this a special challenge match? If it helps, I'm going to help you out here. Well, I'm not going to help you out. Actually, Mr. Wrestling 2 is going to help you out with our final audio clip of the show.
That a lot of people may not understand is where this all came about, the reason for this particular challenge here. This man, I was in Houston, Texas when this thing all really started. Guerrero was in a tag team match, or a six-man tag match, and this gentleman here that he has on the floor right now, Gino, is he right out of nowhere came charging in the ring and busted a chair over this man's head, Chavo, and caused the man to be unable to continue in the six-man tag match, and I myself went in and finished the match for him. And this, as you can well feel and imagine, that there's a lot of animosity between these two men in this particular match.
Okay, so two is not a great commentator. In fact, I would say of all of our guest commentators, he is on the low end of things here. And he tries to explain why this is a special challenge match. And and this is the issue. Like I don't know if they've bought Houston or they've at least, decided to team up with Houston and Paul Bosch to try to get over it. But it's like they are trying really hard to get Houston over since they're running the city now. But almost nobody watching this knows the story. And they don't even really tell you. He tries to. He was there and can't even really tell you what happened. And the problem is, like, it's never been mentioned before on the show as to why this match is happening and why this is a grudge match. They don't show footage. We just have to accept it as something special. And the thing is, I doubt that people sitting at home accept it as anything special. The fans in the crowd weren't really taking it as anything overly special. But they had a fine match at the end of the day. Chavo uses a chop to the neck and a kick just below the ass before using an Irish whip where Gino went flying over the top rope. So Chavo had to argue there was no intent to him going over the top rope, so it wasn't a disqualification. And at that point, we randomly went to commercial. But by the way, before we go to commercial, they randomly, like at the bottom of the screen, and no one calls attention to it, we see the back of the headdress, or the headdress in the back of the head of General Skandor Akbar. What the is he doing here? So, going back to the over-the-top rope rule and having to argue whether or not you're intentionally throwing somebody over, why would that ever end up being a disqualification if the wrestler could just argue that it wasn't intentional? You know, hey, you're caught up in the heat of the moment and you flung the guy and he just flew over the top rope. That's not intentional, is it? So you end up with a lot of bad referee calls and you just end up, it's a really stupid rule. I get you're trying to say, oh, look how dangerous wrestling is. Look how dangerous it is to be thrown over the top rope, which, by the way, loses the allure of danger when you're doing 10,000 battle royals and nobody ever gets injured except, by, accident. but, you know, I don't get it. It's just one of those things. Back from commercial, Chavo has Gino in a surfboard, which, too, in his illustrious opinion here, calls a whoa, whoa, look at this. Boyd then continues on by calling this a battle culmination of stamina 5 minutes into the match here. Two said he doesn't want to be in a match like this, um, and which is a weird thing to say because, like, is he saying that he doesn't want to be in a competitive match? Anyway, Chavo hits she calls that the rear view, but Gino got his feet on the ropes. Two says he's prejudiced here because he wants Chavo to win. The referee takes a bump here. Akbar comes over and gives Gino a chair, but Chavo drop kicked Gino, got the chair, and brained Gino with it. The referee got back in as as Chavo made the cover. He counted to 3, and Chavo wins as the show comes to a somewhat abrupt conclusion. So this, I'll be honest, I love me some Mid-South wrestling, but this was one weird-ass episode of Mid-South. No Junkyard Dog, no Stagger Lee, no Ted DiBiase, no Matt Bourne. We did get Kamala and Gary Hart and Skandar Akbar and all that shit, but it's like the lead people in the show not only are not, on the show, they're not even mentioned. Plus, he had that weirdness at the beginning with Mr. Wrestling 2, and it's just ultimately just a weird ass show. It's one of those shows where if you watch a show, I can't even say, oh, if you watch the show, it was great, yada, yada, yada. I mean, it wasn't necessarily awful, but you're just like, okay, why are they not even, mentioning this here? Why are they not even talking about the big story of the storyline of the company is that, Stagger Lee or the Junkyard Dog is only out for a few more weeks. And why isn't, why isn't Ted DiBiase and Matt Bourne out here doing something to try to go after Stagger Lee's mask? Oh, well, I guess we'll have to wait till next week to see what happens next, I guess. So that does it for Mid-South Wrestling. And before we get going, we're going to finish things up with our favorite way to finish up. It is Weird News of the Week. And that, of course, is Weird News of the Week presented by Nobody. Nobody, the company that sponsors nothing. And, of course, we go to UPI.com. We go to our old friend Ben Hooper. And, it's this time of year, if you're a Christian or, most people in this world, it's Christmas time, and this week's news story is a 103-year-old Christmas tree sells for over $4,000. A 103-year-old artificial Christmas tree, one of the first to be mass-produced, was auctioned for more than $4,000 in Britain. Hanson auctioneers said the 2.5-foot-tall tree, described as the humblest Christmas tree in the world, aka a Charlie Brown tree essentially, was sold for a total of $4,296.13. The tree was brought to Dorothy Grant's family home when she was 8 years old in 1920, and it became a staple of her holidays for her entire life until her death at the age of 101. The tree, which features 25 branches, 12 berries, and 6 mini candle holders, is believed to be one of the first mass-produced artificial Christmas trees and was likely purchased by Grant's mother at Woolworths in London. As simple as it was, Dorothy loved that tree, Charles Hanson, owner of Hanson's Auctioneers, said in a news release. It became a staple part of family celebrations for decades. The fact that it brought her such joy is humbling in itself. It reminds us that extravagance and excess are not required to capture the spirit of Christmas. For Dorothy, it was enough to have a tree. The tree was passed down to Grant's daughter, Shirley Hall, 84, who lives near Loughborough, England. The seller decided to part with it to honor her mother's memory and to ensure it survives as a humble reminder of 1920s life. A boom-to-bust decade. Despite the devastation of the First World War and Spanish flu pandemic, there was renewed optimism, Hanson said. And I'm sure Shirley Hall did not mind having $4,200. But that's going to do it here for this week's episode of Something Else. Another fun episode. I hope you all enjoyed listening to it as much as I've enjoyed doing it. And as long as I play the right song to lay us off the air, we're going to see what plays in a second. And of course, the wrong thing's playing. So let's X out of that, play the right one. And there we go. Call it a night. Thank you all for listening, and I'll talk to you again in 7 days.